Hey everyone, geophysicist Stefan Burns here. We have had some breaking developments occur just in the past few hours, and it involves two volcanoes in the Americas. And this is a very interesting situation, which is why I'm covering this as soon as I can late night here on the East Coast. It is 11:19 p.m. EDT, July 8th, 2025. There has been a new earthquake swarm at Mount Rainier, started today on the 8th, 200 plus earthquakes, the strongest being a magnitude 2.1 now. That occurred at 21:56 Universal Time. And these are all very close to the caldera just underneath the surface. And this is the largest earthquake swarm that's occurred since 2009. So magnitude 2.1 isn't that big of an earthquake, but that is in that magnitude range that we typically see for volcanoes. And so this is showing that Mount Rainier is waking up to some degree, and why it's sending us this signal remains to be seen. Is it going to erupt? Probably not. Last big eruption was around 1450 AD, though there were some eruptions also in the 19th century. A lot of eyewitness reports. And if Mount Rainier was to erupt, the big concern with this, like a significant eruption, is that it would create pyroclastic flows that go out on all sides. But more so than that, because there's so much snow and ice here, it actually melt that and create lahars. And they've estimated that these lahars will drain all the way out to the Puget Sound. So that would be very devastating. So Mount Rainier is currently swarming with earthquakes. And if we go south on the other side, basically the San Andreas, down here in the subduction zone, we have had a magnitude 5.7 earthquake here at 21:41 Universal Time today, July 8th, in Guatemala, just on the slope, the flank of Volcan De Agua, or water in Spanish. So we have Mount Rainier and Volcan De Agua both having significant seismic activity, and a magnitude 5.7 is a big earthquake for a volcano. Also a 4.8 and a 4.8 there right underneath the caldera, though at a depth of 10 kilometers according to the official agencies. So we have two volcanoes, both with water in their name, which is kind of contradictory because these are volcanoes. They spew out fire, magma, and all this crazy stuff, yet they have water-based names on both sides of North America here, while there's been significant, intense flooding in the United States. The most significant weather-related disaster of 2025 has been this flood in the hill country of Texas, the Guadalupe River, rising 30 plus feet in just like 2 hours. And that has, it's like 100 plus people dead from that. May they rest in peace. And there are still 150 plus missing, according to Governor, I believe it's Greg Abbott. So as I thought when I first heard that story, hundreds of people affected by this. Then there was flooding in North Carolina, just east of Greensboro, where it actually was recently for Cosmic Summit. And so that is also quite significant. We can punch in here. The Haw River rose dramatically. Not the same loss of life from that, but still a significant flood event. And now most recently, and I don't have all the data, but most recently there is a flash flooding occurring in New Mexico. Where specifically, I don't know. I've been having to review some other materials in order to do this broadcast, because what we're seeing is significant waterborne events, flooding events, dramatic, quick rainfall events here in the United States. Actually, just this afternoon, we had like a 50% chance of rain here up in near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We had a 50% chance of rain, maybe some thunder and lightning. I was like, okay, it's probably not going to happen. Looked out in the morning, nothing that big of a deal. We had 2 inches come down in 20 minutes in the middle of the day. Lightning strikes, big rumbling, thunder and more. Not out of the blue, but really confirming that planet Earth is a storm world. And probably about 3 inches total over the course of like an hour. But that first 20 minutes, was sharp and severe 2 inches of water. I put out a jug. I actually missed the first part of it. So it's probably like 2.5 inches in like 25 minutes. And we have a lower lawn below the house. And then we have a creek, actually the largest creek in the United States, according to the neighbors. So large and wide it could be called a river, but it's not that deep. And the water just on the slope above that creek was already like 2 inches thick, because it wasn't running off fast enough. So it was just, and the land's pretty absorbent, but still, even then it was so fast, it just basically started to pile up. So we're having these things in more than just these areas, but the 3 that I mentioned, Texas, North Carolina, and New Mexico, right now, definitely the climax of this waterborne event. And I do want you to keep in mind that this is all very resonant with the archetypal astrology, which is that Jupiter just moved into Cancer. If you go by Western tropical astrology, and Jupiter's exalted in Cancer, the archetypal significations of Jupiter, very simply, are growth, expansion, making things bigger, more dramatic, and in that way, kind of exposing some weaknesses at time too. And that is the birth placement for the United States based on this Sibley chart, the Declaration of Independence. So 1776, Jupiter was in Cancer. And right now the sun is in Cancer because it's Cancer season. So we have this spike of water energies astrologically that's resonant with the United States, as we have 2 volcanoes both on both on the sides of the United States, with water in their name, Volcan De Agua and Mount Rainier, rumbling with unusual earthquake activity as we're seeing historic flooding events in the United States. And that's the story, basically. It's crazy. Like, sometimes it really slaps you on the face. But it really does. That's why you study this. And at one point, you just have to go. There's something to that, folks. For anyone that's like still denying this, you gotta wake up and look at the signs. Mother Earth speaks to us directly. She's like, I'll put a rumble under Mount Rainier and a rumble under Volcan De Agua to wake these silly humans up. And what she's waking us up about is the fact that we have had a dramatic salinity change near Antarctica. This is the Southern Ocean Overturning Circulation that people have just recently identified being impacted because we've had a lot of fresh water in and around Antarctica for a while now. Like for decades, the water there has been fairly fresh, and as a result, low salinity. And so this has kept the ocean circulation normal. Now, since 2016, there's been a dramatic change in the salinity. Now there's a lot more saline water at the surface, which kind of upends the normal circulation system in and around Antarctica. And that's warmer water. So you have more saline, warmer water in the area. And the authors in their paper, which came out this year, just recently, they basically state that is going to make any climactic effects like more volatile and sudden and unpredictable. And well, that's what we're seeing. At the same time, the sea surface temperature anomaly in the Mediterranean is off the charts. The Mediterranean is basically a bathtub right now. Incredibly warm temperatures, especially in the western, like the northwestern part of the Mediterranean, but overall across the entire Mediterranean, very high nominal sea surface temperatures. And then if you go up to the North Arctic, we are seeing in general, basically the lowest temperatures, the North Atlantic, we're seeing basically the lowest temperatures in the North Atlantic for 9,000 years. The reason why? Melting sea ice, Heinrich events, glaciers coming off of Greenland, melting in this area. It's one of the few places on Earth that is cooling overall year by year. And it's only because we're losing our cold reservoir here in Greenland, and it's drifting out via Heinrich event to the North Atlantic Ocean. So a tremendous amount that's happening right now, signaling massive climate shifts and therefore big climatic changes here on Earth. Let's look at our earthquakes. We'll start with the Mount Rainier earthquake swarm. Here we go. We're rocking and rolling. Okay, so here's Mount Rainier. Blue is the historic seismicity earthquake since 2020. And the average per month is about 9. Okay, so typically Mount Rainier is getting 9 low-grade earthquakes per month. The stars are all the earthquakes that have occurred today, 200 plus. We don't have 200 plus on this graphic because, again, more of them have rolled through, but that is the current tally. We'll look at the live data so you can see that. Look here, though, at our depth. This is in kilometers, and so we see a lot there at 0. Here's the top of Mount Rainier. It's the largest mountain in Washington, something like 14,500 feet. Really, really striking tall volcano in Washington and one of the largest mountains in the continental U.S. Notice that they're all kind of there underneath perhaps some sort of cap rock for the caldera. And so this is, again, all the earthquakes for 2020 to now. We see this most recent seismic burst there. Not that far below the surface, lower magnitudes, but definitely indicating the movement of something. When you have earthquakes at volcanoes, it's probably not the rock just fracturing and like settling down. It's probably because you have magma on the move, or at the very least, hydrothermal fluids and things of this nature. So significant activity at Mount Rainier. And let us look at this. I have a graphic I pulled up, a fact sheet for Mount Rainier. This is important to look at because this will tell us about the lahars, okay? So this is really quite significant. And here is a informational graphic put up by the USGS. They suspect that about 80,000 people are at risk of something happening to them if the volcano is erupt with like a significant eruption, like we've been seeing at Mount Etna or Fuego in Guatemala. And the biggest risk are lahars. So they're talking about the different types of lahars. There's meltwater generated lahars, landslide generated lahars. You could get both. And these lahars, basically they're these rivers of mud. They can travel tremendous distances because of the water. So it's not just a pyroclastic flow, which can definitely travel out, but can stop after some time. A lahar can keep going. So here they show Mount Rainier. And if there was to be some sort of significant volcanic eruption here, then these lahars could stream all the way out to the Puget Sound, affecting everyone in these river valleys and perhaps even beyond. We really just don't know. This is the best guess, you could say. You know, we have some smart people at the United States Geologic Survey. I volunteered with them back when I was in college. In general, they do a lot of great work. They're under tremendous pressure and stress. They also, USGS is a fairly relaxed job. So you have to think of all the different factors there. But they do overall fantastic work for the American citizens and also for people around the globe. Let's keep that in mind. Doesn't mean there's no funny business at times, but overall, we're happy to have them. So this is what they've mapped out for potential danger zones for lahar. These are the hazard zones there in yellow. And the lava flow and pyroclastic flow hazard zone is in the national park, right around the slopes from Mount Rainier. But you know, if it's really big, it could be catastrophic. I mean, we saw what happened in Mount St. Helens. If we go back to our Google Earth, just to zoom in on Mount Rainier, we'll see that Mount Rainier is the biggest volcano basically on the west coast, other than Shasta. I mean, I could be wrong. Axial Seamount's actually pretty big. That's off the coast though. But look at all these others there. I mean, there's like Mount Hood. There's a whole bunch of lovely volcano mountains in the area. Mount Adams, I don't know all of them. Here's Mount St. Helens. We see that explosion off the side there. You know, you don't even have to you can just look at that and know that something happened there. So we get these things happening at times. That was 1980. That was with the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, 1980. And here's Mount Shasta. So holding up the southern end is another big volcano, Mount Shasta, very, very significant. And that's right where the fault zone starts to change. And so you start to get this Cascadia subduction zone, which is why you get these volcanoes there. Now, if we go back to Guatemala, let's not forget we had that 5.8 right next to a volcano. If we look here, we actually see it's right in between two volcanoes. So here's Volcan Pacaya and then Volcan De Agua. But if we look at our volcano discovery map, we'll see how they're stretching up the slopes of Volcan De Agua. Here we can see, but just in general, there's so many volcanoes in that area. So it's right at the border of the Caribbean plate and also the American plate, I believe. And it should be the American plate. And as a result, and plus the subduction off the coast, you get just tons of volcanic activity in Guatemala. Here is that 5.6 earthquake right there. And then we have a 4.8. And there's another 4.8 hidden under this one right there. All around 10 kilometers of depth. So they're not like immediately directly under the caldera, you could say. But clearly something happening coming up. Because just look at how they're placed under Volcan De Agua. I think they're probably related, right? If you see a duck and it walks like a duck and it swims like a duck and it flies and flutters like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So this is right underneath that volcano system in between Volcan de Pacaya with this magnitude 5.7. I think here on Volcano Discovery they call it 5.6. USGS has a 5.7. That's significant. And also Villanueva just nearby. So when you get a magnitude 5 earthquake like that in a place like this, which probably doesn't have the best building methods, that's a big earthquake. That can cause some significant damage. So there's probably also that's already occurred. And residents probably wondering whether they have more to come and perhaps a volcanic eruption to come. But that may not be the case. My intuition's telling me that we don't necessarily have something in that regard about to happen. It's more so Mother Earth sending us a signal saying, think about the water. Volcan de Agua, Mount Rainier. You have to be prepared for these sort of significant weather events because I am changing in other places. I've basically reversed the salinity of the SMOC, and that is going to change the climate across the globe for some period of time. Here we can look at our Mediterranean, and we can see some of these changes. It's been very hot in the Mediterranean. Here we see our daily sea surface temperature for the entire Mediterranean. We see that it is just charging up, and at this point in time is the highest of maybe not all the years total, but once we meaned out the 1982 to 2015, and we have these other most recent years, definitely the hottest that the Mediterranean has been in the recent time span. And if we go, for example, to the Western Mediterranean, we see just how high it got up right there. Really big spike in that sea surface temperature, and it's only the beginning of July. It's only the beginning of July. We can go, for example, the Eastern Mediterranean, not as much of an effect. So that is starting, helping to balance it out. But as I showed at the beginning, the Mediterranean itself overall is very, very hot right now. So this is one of these areas where you have that anomaly. And we see some of these maps up here as well. Here's the sea surface temperature in the Mediterranean for the 8th of July. And you can look at some of these temperatures. Really quite significant. So it's been hot in the Mediterranean. Some people are having a hot European summer. Bless all of them. I hope they're having a good time, not sweating too much. It can get really hot there in Europe, as many of you are well aware of and may be living in right now. We also have been seeing changes in the Atlantic Ocean. Here's our sea surface temperature anomaly. There's the Mediterranean. And so we can see that. Let's actually click down to Antarctica and see if we can find something about the salinity here. I know they have one punched in right there. So no sea surface temperature anomalies with Antarctica. But here we have our sea ice snow cover. And looks like we have some sea ice, but not a tremendous amount around Antarctica. And that is what's changing. With the fresh water, when you have more fresh water, you also have greater sea ice extent because it freezes a bit easier because the fresh water is colder than the warm water. But this is now shrinking, and sea ice has been at yearly lows now since basically 2016. Let me pull up that image for all of you. And we can talk a little bit about this SMOC reversal. Some people are getting it wrong. They're going too far with the claims of it completely reversing, the circulation reversing. That's not exactly what's happening, but there are some significant things that are unfolding at this moment in time. So what's happening is we are getting a change in the salinity at the SMOC. Okay, so near Antarctica, is that the salinity is changing. And that's still significant, of course, but not as dramatic as a complete reversal of the current. That we don't know if it's happening or not. So here we see the normal convection circulation dynamics of the ocean. And here you have Antarctica. Wind is carrying some water off. And overall, you get this kind of colder, fresher water on top. And then down below, it's actually a little bit warmer, about 1 degree Celsius warmer. And so this cold water normally goes like this, but it also will go out on the top and kind of create this insulating layer around this warmer water that's coming in from further north, right? Antarctica is the bottom right there, South Pole. So any water coming into that zone is going to be warmer generally because it's coming in from like the Indian Ocean, or it's coming in from like the Atlantic or the Pacific. So the fact that now this cold water system is being disrupted and we're getting this hotter water from like the more northerly latitudes to then come down and sit on top means that we're going to have a degradation of that sea ice in Antarctica, therefore less albedo, though maybe that also corresponds to less libido for the Earth, less albedo, less reflection of light and energy from the planet, meaning more temperature from that perspective too, because dark, cold water absorbs more solar radiation and heat. We're in solar maximum. So this is just showing that there's just more energy coming into the planet. And the one place where this is kind of bucking the trend is the North Atlantic, as I mentioned. So here we have that data, and we see 9,000 years of temperatures for the North Atlantic as well as ice cover. So again, it's because of the Heinrich events, the sea ice and just the ice melting and the glaciers melting in Greenland is causing these temperatures to go down. We've been having melting at Greenland ever since the end of the Younger Dryas. We had some meltwater events. So this is also, keep in mind, this data here is for BP, or before present. And that means that it's not necessarily for the modern day, because BP is the year 1950. So we recorded the lowest North Atlantic sea surface temperatures in 1950 as compared to the entire 9,000 year stretch going back to the sudden warming after the Younger Dryas. And that in general is still holding true, because as the Earth is warming up, it is melting those polar regions faster and faster, and that sea ice flowing into and melting into the ocean will create a cold anomaly there. But we're losing basically our reservoir of cold or lower energy everywhere else on the planet. So the entire planet is waking up right now, which means more parts can start talking to each other. There can be more turbidity in mixing. Like in the troposphere, the lower atmosphere, there's a tremendous amount of mixing, both with like water and with the different elements and with heat and energy. It's very, very active. So as some of these other areas that have kind of been a little bit more stagnant because they have more set energy and order systems come online and basically warm up, then everything can start playing together a little bit more easily. And that's just going to mean crazier weather events all across the globe. We're not seeing this flooding just in the United States. We're also seeing it in China, Europe, and also South America, but really all over. But it's really making itself apparent in the United States right now with the floods now in New Mexico, then in North Carolina, and furthest back on July 4th on Independence Day, right in Hill Country, Texas. Let's check out that Sibley chart. Our Sibley chart is showing the astrological forces that were active at the time of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, 4th of July, 1776. Here's the sign of Cancer, not constellation sign. This is based on the seasons, so the equinox and solstices, that axis that it creates. We see here Jupiter in Cancer exalted. We see the sun there in Cancer. We also basically just had the birthday, right? July 4th of the United States. So right now we have Jupiter and the sun in Cancer while we have all these dramatic flooding events, really rapid, sudden, volatile in America as Mount Rainier and Volcan De Agua are rumbling with earthquake swarms, basically warning us that that is probably going to continue. We're going to see more and more things like that. So be prepared. Have a bug out bag, a bag that you can grab with essential supplies, because as I found out today with 2.5 inches of rain basically in like 25 minutes, like it can come down within like 30, 40 minutes. The people in Texas, they had less than an hour before all of a sudden 25 feet of water came through. So you need to be ready to go when it happens. You can't be asleep. You can't be, completely high out of your mind. We have to retain some level of consciousness with these things. And that does mean that you have to be kind of like awake and prepared. So grounding is the best thing you do to help stay grounded. Also stay in touch with the earth. Don't hold yourself up in the house all day. Actually, go outside, see what the weather's doing. Like actively go out of your way to check out the weather forecast, because they're not as good now because of all the cuts and reductions in staff as they used to be in pushing out severe weather alerts. And they've been getting some of these severe weather forecasts completely wrong. It's just an unfortunate reality. You can't outsource your responsibility. So you have to do it yourself. And I know it's a lot, but this is part of the ascension of consciousness on the planet. It's requiring more of us, greater intelligence. We have to study these things. We have to learn. We are lifelong students. We cannot just sit idle on our breeches and expect everything to be okay. That's not the way it's going to work, especially with such powerful energies at this moment in time. Because we also have Uranus back in Gemini, which is right here. And that has, every time Uranus has been in Gemini, we had basically civil war and strife. The American Revolution was a civil war between the loyalists and also the revolutionaries. So a lot of Americans were on the loyalist side, loyal to the British. So that was a civil war as well, just the very, very bloody one that also involved a whole bunch of other nations, all the Native American tribes and nations. So there was like 20 plus independent governments, you could say, all interacting together during the American Revolution. Then 84 years later, Uranus comes back. Boom, we get the Civil War. What did we also have back then? We had Neptune in Aries. Same placement that we have right now. In fact, when Neptune shifted into Aries with Western tropical astrology, it was like within a day that the Civil War started. I think it was the day after, but it might have been the day before. Either way, immediately that war, the first shots broke out. And then when Uranus did one more rotation 84 years later, guess what? World War II, global war the United States was involved with, Pearl Harbor, you know the rest. So we're back there now in 2025. What does that mean? Well, I think it's going to be some sort of evolution on those themes. It may be something digital, or I don't know. But either way, 3 times in a row, that's kind of a trend. Uranus seems to be a little figured out in this case. So that is definitely a very potent energy, with Neptune also at the position it was during the Civil War, and Pluto right near the position it was in, and throughout where it was going all the way up to the Constitution for the American Revolutionary War. So Saturn is the big unknown here, because it's also conjunct Neptune, which is different. And that's indicating some sort of change with Russia too, based on the synodic cycle of Saturn and Neptune. You can check out the work of Dan Waits at World Astrology Report to get more info on that. He has covered that in depth. Great reporting by Dan. So there's just a tremendous amount that's happening at this moment in time. And I just kind of had to give you this late night live update to make sure that you're aware of the situation, because this could evolve very quickly. These earthquake swarms in 2 volcanoes is quite serious. And then we also have all these floods occurring all across the United States and more. So here are the earthquakes at Mount Rainier. And I actually have it set for magnitude 2 and greater. So you see just one earthquake there. And you see that this was in the last 2 hours. So if we go, and actually let me refresh this page, because I think it's been, maybe it auto refreshes, but for the sake of the video, let me refresh the page. We're going to the control panel, and let me go back to all earthquakes greater than magnitude 2. Yeah, just that one. If we go include all of them, we see this swarm here. A lot of earthquakes just in the past 2 hours and 2 days as well, but most of those are red, right? Let's go to analyze. Let's actually zoom out a little bit, and we will take a cumulative number here. We'll draw our line going right from there to there, and then we will expand that to capture all those earthquakes. And let's hit plot. Here we go. Look at the number of earthquakes since the 19th of June 2025. Basically, 9 per month is the average. And then look at this new swarm there. All of a sudden going from about 25 right about here, right? 25 to over 200, about 225, maybe 215 or so. So a massive increase in earthquakes at Mount Rainier. Looks like there's a little bit of a slope change there. So really rapid, and then a little bit of a slowdown, but just in general. I mean, this is just happening now. So we don't know where this is going to go. The last earthquake swarm in 2009 was very significant. There was 1,000 plus earthquakes that occurred there. This is the biggest earthquake swarm since 2009 at Mount Rainier. So tremendous amount happening. We go here, we see just all the earthquakes in general for Central America. And now let's punch in specifically on Guatemala once more and just, again, see if anything new has happened before I sign off. So, yeah, here is our magnitude 5.7. They updated it. And then here's the 4.8, 4.8, and 4.2, 4.1, 3.9, 4.0, all within basically the past 4 hours. The big one, though, 6 hours ago now. So, looks like 36 minutes ago, magnitude 2.8. So this thing is still going, but the magnitudes are dropping. 19 minutes ago, magnitude 2.8. But again, you'll see them mostly clustered there on Volcan De Agua. So big activity at 2 big volcanoes that could erupt in spectacular fashion if they decided to do so. We'll just have to wait and see whether or not that is the case, but we really hope that does not happen, especially for Mount Rainier, because if it did, then it very potentially could create these pyroclastic flows and lahars that could affect people living in these areas going all the way out to the Puget Sound. So, yeah, significant stuff happening at this moment in time. Thank you all so much for watching, everyone. I've been your host, Stefan Burns. This is what I cover on the channel. Breaking news on geologic events, geophysical energy swings, also solar activity, space weather, planetary resonances. We look at everything as you discovered in this video. I don't leave any stone unturned. I figure there's something valuable in all the information. And for a system like astrology that's been used, it's the oldest science. It's been used for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years, going back to like Göbekli Tepe and beyond. There's something to it. There's some truth to it. So it's not the only thing we look at, but we look at all the things here. I do my best to bring that all together, present videos almost daily. If you like the sound of that, then please subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching. Wishing all of you well. Please be prepared. Scouts motto. You learned that in the Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout. So make sure you have your stuff ready to go. You have 72 hours of supplies on hand. This is water, this is food, this is power, this is a hand crank radio. Doesn't have to be that complicated. Little first aid kit, bug out bag, the basics. Make sure you are prepared. That is my closing message for you all today. Wishing all of you well. Have a great one.